Welcome to Musings and Modalities. I'm your host, Tristen Stawicki. Think of me as your pragmatic shaman bestie. Join in with other high vibe, lovely people as I unravel spiritual ideas to help create change and growth in your life. I cover a variety of spiritual topics, sharing knowledge to meet you wherever you are in your journey. As a shaman, astrologer, and human design reader, I help you understand how to make informed decisions and incorporate different modalities using discernment in your own intuition. Today, you will gain powerful shamanic healing tools you can use to incorporate spiritual practices in non-traditional ways. Whether you're just beginning or need a knowledgeable best friend with the next phase of your journey, I'm here to help. Stay tuned. Musings and Modalities starts now. How to manage, recover, and acknowledge your limits in a world on fire. In this episode, I'll cover the different types of burnout and what pragmatic and practical tools are helpful to get you back to feeling like yourself again. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge and really name the collective stress we are all under at this time. We are being inundated with news and information at a rate that is no less than staggering, and much of that news is unfortunately pretty hard, pretty horrifying, pretty unbelievable. And so my goal, not only with this episode, but always, right, is to be a safe space filled with hope and curiosity and helpful tips to ultimately guide those listening to feel better about their day or to just be 30 minutes of escape for them. And so, as we have this very real and frank discussion about burnout, I really want you to keep this goal in mind as you hear kind of actionable tips that will hopefully ease those feelings of, maybe hopelessness or apathy that are coming up for more and more people. All right, so with that part kind of acknowledged, I want to really give gratitude to our bodies. Our bodies are unbelievably resilient and badass. They continue to evolve and handle new stressors that the generations before us perhaps didn't have to deal with, right? So if you aren't driving and you're able to wrap your arms around yourself, give a little hug of acknowledgement for all that our bodies handle for us each and every day. Beautiful. Okay. So let's talk about burnout. What is burnout, right? It's this term that's in the zeitgeist. And when looking at the Oxford Dictionary, I actually had a laugh at some of the definitions for burnout. So I wanted to share them just because they are pretty funny to talk about in this context. So the first definition is the reduction of a fuel or substance for nothing, or sorry, restart. The first definition is the reduction of a fuel or substance to nothing through use or combustion. Right. And that was even hard for me to get through because we don't speak like that. And the second definition is the failure of an electrical device or component through overheating. Now, these are some of the most robotic and clinical definitions that are like humorous in how rigid they are, right? And they aren't a match for kind of the visual of what we think about the experience of being burned out, in this modern world looks like. And it's almost like when we're trying to emulate a machine that we set ourselves up for this kind of in state of extreme fatigue. So I do want to acknowledge a better description for this was easily found, right, on WebMD, where it kind of defined burnout as a form of exhaustion caused by constantly feeling swamped. It happens when we experience too much emotional, physical, and mental fatigue for too long. And that is much more in line with kind of what we were thinking overall. But I did want to acknowledge that the more that we push ourselves to act like a machine and push ourselves beyond the boundaries of what a human's able to handle, that, we are at risk of burning ourselves out. So I wanted to talk about a few different types of burnout that can vary kind of depending on the circumstances you're experiencing. It is not a kind of one size fits all by any means. And so to start, there is overload burnout. And that is the singular focus on trying to achieve success And you put that goal above health, above personal relationships, and it really becomes this kind of singular focus in your life. And this is often a trope we see in romantic comedies and in movies, but there are often times where if we're trying to get a promotion or we're trying to achieve that next level in our career, that we knowingly make the choice to put some of those non-negotiables, some of those focuses on the back burner for a specific period of time. Maybe that's a quarter or, a few months or what have you after a huge project. And so I don't want to say that burnout isn't, I'm going to be careful how I phrase this. If we choose to go into burnout for a specific goal, I think we should have parameters around it and know that it is, I don't want to say a tool, but an option to do, but it should really be time-based and really balanced with that. Because there are times, unfortunately, where we do have to work harder, and I don't want to kind of skate over that overall. But this is one example of burnout that can happen. A really challenging one to kind of overcome is under-challenged burnout. And the reason I mention it can be a little more challenging is because it's not often able to be named. So it's that feeling of boredom and being unfulfilled, especially for longer periods of time. And this could happen, if you're in a role in your company that you've been in for many years, you're basically on autopilot, either there or other elements of your life, and you're really staying in that state of like stagnancy without anything prompting you to change or grow. And you just feel that kind of discomfort. And it can be kind of challenging to figure out why, and you'll have to do some self-reflection during that. All right, so we've had overload burnout, under challenge burnout. Next, we have neglect burnout. And that is really those feelings of helplessness that are prevalent overall. And so, some things that can happen with this one is if you're constantly doubting yourself and your abilities, if you're downplaying your accomplishments, or believe you're an imposter at work or the things that you're trying to do in life, you could be experiencing neglect burnout. And finally, we have habitual burnout, which is by far the most serious. And that's where you are experiencing chronic mental and physical fatigue. And it can be really, really challenging to rise above those feelings of despair and sadness. And when you're experiencing something like habitual burnout, your worldview can get really small. And you can more easily move into a state of depression or even have, suicidal thoughts. And you might not feel like you have the ability to see a way out, see a way to kind of change the experience you're in, which is really, really challenging to deal with. Throughout our lifetime, I think it's inevitable, right? That we'll experience at least one, if not most, of the above types of burnout. And one of the worst things you can do with burnout is to ignore it, right? And keep pushing yourself. So I want to move into how we can acknowledge burnout is happening while you're in the thick of it. When doing research for this episode, there are officially 12 stages of burnout. I do not want to go through each stage because that is frankly boring and kind of tedious. But I did want to pick out some highlights that I saw, as well as bring in my own experiences that I've had to put together a list of a few red to yellow flags for us to be aware of. So the first one is neglecting your non-negotiables. So again, crediting a coach that I'm working with for this term, non-negotiables, but they are the things each day that you are trying to do. That is get enough sleep to feel rested, eating food that's nourishing for you, moving your body, physically touching grass and getting outside. Whatever those are, once you start to compromise or even really neglect doing those things, especially if you start to get less sleep and then you're not eating well and then it just kind of compounds. This is really a sign that burnout's a destination that you're rapidly approaching. So we really want to be cognizant of that, and really monitor as you start to not have time for or really don't prioritize your non-negotiables. The second one is change or loss of values. And so let's say some of your core values are integrity, honesty, curiosity. And you'll notice I give these examples a lot in the podcast. These are my own personal values, so I find them more easily to talk about. Of course, your core values may vary. And when you have those core values, especially when they are with honesty and integrity, there could be a change or loss of values if you're headed for burnout, and you can find yourself kind of slipping up. So maybe you start sharing some untruths or half-truths, or you're catching yourself sliding into more morally gray areas, rather than standing strong in your integrity and standing strong in like what you believe overall. And so this is a really big heads up to come back into alignment, to really stand firm in what matters to you, because not only is burnout a destination you're headed to with this, but it can be really challenging if you kind of shy away or move away and lose your values to recognize your life. That's typically when I've talked to clients and worked with people. One of the big kind of red flags is when that starts to happen to them as they look back on their past experiences in their life, and then they kind of wake up one day and say, I don't recognize the life I'm in. I don't know who I am. And that can be really, really hard to come back from. It is you're obviously able to come back from it. I'm able to come back from it. Like that may be an experience that you are having in the world, and that's absolutely okay. But I just want to acknowledge if we can make life a little easier on you for you to have those kind of checks and balances in place, like let's put that into practice. Number three is changes in mood and behavior. This is more of like a yellow flag, right? But really check to see, is your wit and are your jokes more biting? Are they more snarky than light sarcasm? This is one I am definitely um, can have. I know when I start to turn on to a little bit mean rather than like fun, um, observational comedy, then I'm like, oops, something's not in alignment. Like what's wrong in my world that I need to correct. It also could be that anger is coming up more frequently for you, or even just your emotions won't settle and they're staying right at the surface. I think we've all experienced where your emotions feel like a pot that's ready to boil, and you're like, I just have so much energy and just like expression I need to get out, and can be a really uncomfortable place to be. And I know the further that I get from joy and happiness and that, especially that content state, I know I need to make some immediate changes or put into place those kind of firm time boundaries, to say, okay, the next 2 weeks, this may be my lived experience. I'm going to have to really buckle down and overwork and, do all these things. But how can I then make a plan to get out of this state? How can I make a plan to put in my boundaries, and all of those safeguards I have once again? Number four is the loss of motivation and coupled with an increase in apathy. So a couple things that I monitor for myself, that might be helpful for you are, I notice when I start to take longer and longer to get out of bed in the morning, or I'm scrolling a lot more on my phone, maybe for, over an hour, hour and a half before going to sleep. And really anytime I need to switch through the different parts of my day, right? Starting my day, going to work, finishing my day at work, moving into the evening. I noticed that when I need more and more kind of recovery time or the ability to kind of zone out, it's a warning to me that my passion and motivation for life is really struggling. And I need to make some changes to make sure I'm back to my normal. I'm back to my kind of natural state of contentment. For number five, and I've kind of hinted at this in others, but and ultimately, I hope you don't have to experience this, but your life seems unrecognizable. And this could be coupled with a constant weight on your shoulders, right? There are more challenging or dark feelings than light ones, and you aren't sure how you're going to be able to dig yourself kind of out of the hole you're in. And please know I'm speaking through experience. I've had this several times in my life, and it is absolutely achievable to get back into kind of your next level, get back to where you were, whatever your journey is. But I wanted to share that the key here, especially if you're kind of having that realization or you're having the need to make major changes in your life for your own happiness, is to really focus on what you can change. What's the next best step you can do to feel relief and to feel better? When I start to notice the signs of burnout, or even if I'm in the middle of exhaustion and mind-numbing fatigue, I know I need to let some things go. And I need to reflect on what is no longer working in my life, what's no longer serving me, or what do I need to release because it's really not going to support me in my next chapter? And in preparing for this topic and thinking about when I've experienced burnout in my life, especially in my professional life, um, it really was to avoid grief and to avoid moving on. Um, there were some jobs that I really loved working with the people at, but found the 80 and 100-hour weeks were just so detrimental to my body, so detrimental to my mental health. And it was really hard to leave kind of the community that I had there, but it was so necessary. And so typically when there is this prolonged burnout, especially, I find that it's because there's something I don't want to let go of. And I really need to do some work to be able to release that attachment to it and to be able to have the hope that something better is coming for me and something better is coming for my overall mental and physical health. All right. So let's say you're starting to notice a few signs you're heading for burnout, right? Or maybe you're like, out of the five I kind of went through, you're like 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5. So I want to make sure that you have some actionable items so we can stop this train from kind of speeding down the track and picking up steam. So for the first one is to get some sleep. This is normally one of the first things affected by overworking, anxiety, any of that stuff, all of the kind of symptoms of burnout or the scenario with burnout, because you've likely been pushing yourself quite a bit. So rather than suggesting that you kind of spin up and start thinking about all the ways you need to make changes to avoid further burnout, like rest. Rest is number one. Sleep in, take a nap, do what you can. To even take a mental health day, really recommend that. Cancel your meetings, like treat it like a sick day because truly it actually is a sick day. It's a day of recovery, to avoid, maybe further weakening your immune system, to avoid actually like getting really, really sick because your body's been in this state of stress. You are not at 100% all the time, you know what I mean? And you are not at 100% if you're experiencing any symptoms of burnout. So take that time you need to deeply rest and relax. For number two, I really recommend you get outside, visit a coffee shop, go to the library, really just go somewhere outside of your home or work to think about your life, to think about your day, right? So, and the key with this is to really think about it from a neutral perspective. And I want you to think about kind of playing detective to see what's driving you towards burnout. So whether that, I mean, work's always an easy example, but it could be in relationships too. It could be that if you're in a partnership or relationship with family, that you've been overgiving, your boundaries have been kind of overrun, and you just feel like you can't give anymore, and you've done all you can without replenishment. That is another area that we really want to reflect on. So I would really look at like all areas of your life, safety, security, relationships, work, all of the things from that neutral perspective, almost that sacred witness I've talked about previously, to say, okay, what's affecting you? Where do I feel it in my shoulders? Where do I feel it in my body that like things aren't where they need to be and I need to make some changes? And it also could be the time of year. So I don't want to lose out. Like sometimes burnout can happen because your work has a busy season. I just think it's really important that you have that awareness and that you put safeguards into place so you can recover more easily from that, or maybe set even further like firmer boundaries during that time so that you don't reach burnout, which would ultimately be the goal. For number three, after you've, kind of played detective and have pinpointed the origin of exhaustion and overworking, whatever that is, we're going to reaffirm some boundaries and set some new ones. So really think about the safeguards you can put into place. Think about if this is a temporary situation with a natural expiration date, for instance, moving. I think everyone gets burnt out when you're moving to a new place, packing up your old place, like whatever the situation is, when your home life is changing that drastically, even if you're full of excitement, that is like a perfect storm of burnout, right? Just because you're unsettled and you're not able to replenish naturally in a way that you would because home isn't that for you because it's in a state of flux. And I really want you to think about, are there drastic changes that need to be made? Or is it just a few small changes that you need to let go of and stop doing? It doesn't always have to be that this idea we have to kind of burn our life down by any means. Sometimes it's like, I mean, a silly example, but one that was really impactful for me is I did 6 months of dance 4 days a week, almost 5 days a week. And I found like I was headed for burnout with doing that in the evenings after work. And once I cut it back to like 3 days a week, with occasional workshops and things like that, my like just that quick shift to just have another rest day, to have another day where I'm not at dance, completely like revitalized my relationship with it and stop that train to burnout, right? Where ultimately, if I had maybe continued on that path, and again, I know it's a little bit of a silly example, but I want you to think about like where there are just things that you're kind of doing on autopilot or things that you're spending your time on that maybe you can cut back 10%, 5%, a little bit to just free you up to just have more space in your week. For number four, protect your energy. This includes reducing time scrolling, taking a break from the news cycle, really quieting the noise. Because I want you to be able to focus on yourself and do what you need to do. And when you're kind of scattering your energy by doing that, and we all do it, but I think it's right now the both the news cycle and all of the conversation that the collective's having is not replenishing for most people. And so kind of opting out of that for a bit or taking some time for yourself is really, really recommended. Number five, ask for help and be honest with yourself on what you can do at this time. And I know this is probably one of the more challenging things, but I present the opportunity for you to look for support within your family, within your friendships, within your community. Be honest about what you can do and where assistance is needed. No one can do it all. I cannot do it all. No one, no one, no one. So we aren't meant to do it all, is kind of my stance. And so really want to encourage you to let others be a source of support for you during this time. And finally, number six, make time for fun. Most importantly, like I've found when I am working too much or spending just time just in the adulting space, it can be really draining. There's so many things we always have to do as adults. And when I don't make time for fun in my week and carve out that space, I find that my zest for life is not the same. Like, just everything feels a little more bleak. And so I really want you to, after you've kind of protected your energy, done all the other steps, just make sure you are making time for fun and curiosity and different things because it is so replenishing and so, so needed. All right, so I wanted to talk about recovery and support. So, just like we need to change up our movement routines, our nutrition, we need to reflect and change up what brings us joy. So, as I mentioned, I try to build in time each week for adventure and newness to keep the energy flowing and the conditions for magic possible. I also wanted to talk about from a health perspective what I do for myself personally. So, when I'm recovering for burnout, I'm upping my vitamin C and vitamin D intake. I'm reaching for herbs that help with adrenal fatigue. I recommend, of course, working with a medical for sorry, I recommend working with a medical professional as I am not one. But I have had labs and blood work done, as I'm recovering from burnout, for myself, just to make sure like I'm kind of assisting it as much as possible. And so the reason that I do that is because I know how resilient our bodies are. And I know that they have maybe been working, or I know for a fact they've been working behind the scenes in those suboptimal conditions. And that may have gone on far longer than we realize. And though it's exceptionally cool how our body's able to adjust and adapt, there, I believe, is absolutely a cost to our bodies having to be creative and getting what it needs. So I want to honor that, use science to see like how I need to help my body be back in that optimal state, and support it in any way possible as we're going through recovery from burnout. All right. For my BFFs only, I wanted to chat about spiritual burnout. And this can happen when we've overcommitted or start to feel drained with our spiritual routines and rituals. For me, this first shows up with my morning routine where I dread doing it. I avoid grounding. I'm just like not into it. I'm like, let me do anything else. I'll even start to clean my house rather than trying to pull cards or do my gratitude journal, like it's just, I'm not in the mood for it. And once I start to feel disconnected from the habits I've built, or if I'm just not feeling replenished or excited by them, I first acknowledge that this is normal and a cycle that I go through, and this happens to pretty much everyone I've talked to in the community. So I want to remove any judgment or feelings around it. But ultimately, I really treat this as a sign I need to change things up and typically level up my practice. Typically, it means I've graduated beyond the tools that have been helpful for me of the last 6 months to a year, what have you. And when I have that realization, I am, of course, grateful for that. Like, that's what I'm here for, right? I'm here to continue to level up my spiritual journey. I'm here to continue to level up the tools that I have available. And so I ask my guides to communicate or present to me what next level of practice should look like. I give them several days to do this where I can reflect and just stay receptive. I take a break from my morning routines or any of my spiritual routines and I try to spend time in the woods. I try to do gentle hikes to reconnect, to really listen to nature. And I also, of course, take time for fun. And I notice when I start to treat my spiritual practice like work or just another thing to do in my long list of tasks, I know I've been working and doing too much without leaving time for play. So I really encourage you, if you're someone that is kind of experiencing some less than fun feelings while you're pulling cards or any of your spiritual practices, to really take a break, of course, but to really see where your guides want you to kind of level up the tools and habits you have each day. All right, so I hope this episode was helpful in learning more about identifying and recovering from burnout. Thank you so much for watching Musings and Modalities with me, your pragmatic shaman bestie. Tune in the second and fourth Mondays of each month at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern for more fabulous episodes. If you haven't worked with me before, I'm offering a free 30-minute call with me for chakra clearing and balancing. And this is where I'll use Reiki to remove energetic blockages, align your energy, and replenish where you're feeling a bit depleted. As always, if you'd like to learn more about the astrology happening in the world in 2025 and how all of the planetary transits will affect your experience this year, my 90-minute astrology readings use your birth time, date, and location and provide insight into your personalized blueprint into both your past and future. In those readings, I go through each of the 12 houses in depth to cover your planetary placements and how they work within your chart and within your life. I'll also share kind of your important days over the next year, as well as we'll spend a lot of time kind of talking about your special gifts and talents. These offerings and more can be found at musingsandmodalities.com. I also wanted to invite you to the more than almost 14,000, which is, wow, I'm still in shock at that. 14,000 other lovely people that have joined and make up the Facebook community of Musings and Modalities page. Please join it. I'm really focused on sharing kind of positivity and having a really safe space over there. And we'd love to have you there. Thank you so much for listening. You've been listening to Musings and Modalities with me, Tristen, your pragmatic shaman bestie. For more powerful healing tools, join me every second and fourth Monday at 8 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio. I cover a variety of topics to meet you wherever you are at on your spiritual journey. Learn techniques to work with pendulums, past life healing, astrology, and more. Please share the show and subscribe for more guidance from your pragmatic shaman bestie at musingsandmodalities.com.